Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Dan Halliday's This is How We Shmoo It, or How You Shmoo It.
We shmoo it.
We shmoo it. We shall shmoo it together. My name is Aidan Blake. I'm one of the Swordsquatch organizers. Again, we are super happy to have you all here, and welcome to Swordsquatch 2021 Cybersquatch 2, if you will, Electric Boogaloo. I've just been one of the runners since we started, and so now I'm also doing moderation and some online hosting. That's always fun. Some quick reminders for this session. Some quick housekeeping is just we want to remind everybody that Black Lives Matter. I want to remind everybody that we are currently broadcasting from native Duwamish land, and I want to recognize that. We are going to have people who are going to be broadcasting from all over native land, from all over the United States. And that's just something we want to point out. This year we're sponsored by Purple Heart Armory, so go check out their website. We're going to be giving out some Purple Heart prizes later on in the week, likely after the tournament or after the whole event wraps up. So keep an eye out for those. As always, please be respectful in chat. Don't be abusive. Don't be a dick. We'll kick you out if you are, and that's, I don't think any of you are though, because you're all lovely. Feel free to ask questions in chat or in the Q&A feature. I'm going to be taking questions and slinging them on over to Dan when we have breaks and whatnot. And that's pretty much all the housekeeping. I think we can go right to Dan. Let me pin his video so you don't have to look at me. Aha, there we go. Dan, take us away.
Hey, hello everybody. And oh wait a minute, you're still up. Wait. Hang on.
Everyone sees Dan, right?
How do I bigify myself? There we go.
Oh, you're pinned. You're good. Yep. Oh, I see.
So, hello everybody. My name is Dan Halliday. I am instructor and organizer with Liberty Sword Club on Lenape land, which you might know as Jersey City, New Jersey. And so a few years ago, I woke up one day and found that I could not lift my left arm. Hurt a whole lot, and so I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, you got a whole bunch of inflammation in your rotator cuff there. So I went through all kinds of physical therapy and said, all right, well, I should probably learn a little bit about shoulders. Turns out there's a lot. And this overall it didn't come directly from sword use. But I started noticing this happening all over the place with people. I am not sure how many people I know who have experienced some kind of tendonitis or injury to some kind of joint in the course of their HEMA career. So I wanted to kind of try and figure out what things we can do to kind of help minimize the impact of this. So some guidelines that we can follow while we're fencing. While we're practicing, while we're training. Especially because a lot of people come into this hobby with not a whole lot of prior experience in martial arts or sports. That's me as well. And yeah, so I started coming up with things, and I kind of got a decent system going. And I said, well, I need a cool acronym. And I did not come up with a cool acronym. I instead came up with a very silly acronym, and that acronym is SHMeW. So let's get into it. What does SHMeW stand for? SHMeW is an acronym that stands for shoulders, hips, meridian, wrists. It's meant to, anywhere from a diagnostic checklist to a kind of a full overall recursive thing that you can just kind of meditate on and get to know your body a little bit better. So I'm going to start by going through this. I'm just going to start by going through the list. Just give a really basic overview of things, and then we'll give a little bit of a deeper dive into each of those things individually and how they play with each other. So step one, S, shoulders. As I like to say it, the shoulder is not a joint, it's a dozen muscles in a trench coat. Shoulders are ridiculous. Let me give the one actually good contribution that Mark Rivito has had to the fitness world, the scapula in the back pocket. So this is the shoulder blade. This is the shoulder blade, and this is me very washed out. This is the shoulder blade. It sits right back here. Your upper arm connects to this shallow dish over here. It's a really crappy dish, and if you are somebody like me who has weird hypermobility stuff, you can, it's like it just kind of pops right out. It's the only thing that's holding your arm in this socket is soft tissue. From there, this little guy right here connects via a joint that looks like this to your collarbone. From there, your collarbone attaches to your sternum right here. This is the one and only place where your arm connects to the rest of your body. All of this is the pectoral girdle or the shoulder girdle, just a big mess of muscles and connective tissue that allow your arm to have a pretty incredible range of motion at the expense of inherent stability. So what gives us stability in the shoulder? Well, one of the things about the scapula is that it, again, because it's not attached to anything, you can just kind of float around. When the scapula is allowed to kind of come away from the rib cage, then you lose some of the connection to the rest of your body. In fact, if you pick up a sword, you can test this yourself. Or actually, no, we're not going to do that just yet. However, when the scapula is brought close to the rib cage and does most of its movements much closer to the rib cage, then it can bear a lot more weight. It's a lot more stable because you have a better connection to the rest of your body. If I grab my sword and I kind of allow my shoulder blade to come away from my ribs, I feel the weight of this sword right here. When that reconnects over there, I now feel the weight of that sword through all of this. A couple of common inefficiencies that people run into. Things like, I'm going to keep this a little bit closer. Things like shrugging the shoulders, trying to reach further. The shrugging is really what does it. And we're going to get into a little bit of why that might happen and some fixes that you can give to that. But without going into this too deep, we're going to get into the next subject, which is hips. So your question for S, shoulders. Are my shoulders set? Are my shoulders and my shoulder blades in a position where I can move fluidly but still absorb force and bear weight? Moving on to H. H is hips. And our question for hips is for the most part, are they open? Your legs do a few things in your hip socket. One of those things is internal and external rotation. Internal rotation is, I've got my toe and it points to the inside. That is internal. Toe points to the outside. That is external. Of course, you need both of these things for any kind of locomotion, including fencing. However, in a static stance, the hips can kind of rotate internally when tension is lost over here. The advice that you get really early on in your fencing class, where you want the knees and toes going in about the same direction, that is where this becomes an issue. I have force going this way, I have force going that way, and that produces shear on the knee, results in knee injuries. So in H, all my hips open. One of the things that we're looking for is are these muscles here engaged? Are things in my hips working, or am I sort of losing that tension there, which is losing stability in my lower body? I'll get into another point of this, which we'll get into that addresses pelvic tilt. Comes into play, I think, a little bit less than hips open versus hips closed. But it is still a thing to pay attention to. We'll get into what pelvic tilt is and how we can sort of course correct for that with ourselves. We will, of course, get back to that. And if the guy on a motorcycle wants to stop down his engine, cool. ME, meridian. Meridian is the center line, imaginary line that goes from the top of your head down to your center and the center of your base. And what we are looking for in this case is, particularly with two-handed weapons, the question that I like to ask there is the space between my hands in line with my center? So if I have the space between my hips is projecting this way, then am I keeping my hands in line with that center, which is to say that, am I striking out over here, or am I over here? This alignment with the center is a thing that is the part where we start to really kind of tie into the other things. But the question there is fairly simple. Is the space between my hands in line with my center? Now, does this also apply to one-handed swords? Yes. Because, of course, the simple question of my hands in line with my center is a great sort of question. But the real question is, are each of my arms within a comfortable range of motion? In the case of one-handed weapons, let's use the longsword for this. I got all this range of motion. I can get my arm to right here. I can get my arm out to right here. I can move anywhere along this plane with ease. I cannot do that when I have a second hand on the sword. Attempting to do this with two hands on the sword gets very awkward very quickly. Both hands are tied to one another. To get all the way onto one side involves forcing one hand well across the meridian, and it ends up being terribly uncomfortable. Now, the last point in this checklist is wrists. Again, go way on back to your first HEMA class and get the advice of no broken wrists. I forgot that joke was there. Right, this is a thing that we all kind of like to practice. And the question here: are my wrists straight? Right, because as we all know, if the wrist is in some kind of weird flexion or weird extension like this, force comes in through the sword because you have an inefficiency at this joint. And if you kind of get stuck there, you lose strength in that joint. You absorb a bunch of impact in there that you don't need to be absorbing, and you get other things like dropping the sword, hitting the floor with the sword, and various other just kind of uncomfortable things. So W, wrists, are my wrist straight. Hey, thank you for driving away, Mr. Motorcycle. So let's dive into these things a little bit more. S, shoulders. So what is it that keeps the shoulder blade close to the rib cage? There's a lot of answers, but the place where most people seem to run into trouble is in serratus anterior. Serratus anterior is that cool little sawtooth muscle looking thing. Hence the name serratus. So, they saw in the front. You see it really prominently on boxers because these boxers are really doing that all the time. And its job is to take the scapula and this more or less does this. On the other, to again put it very simply, on the other side of that, we have the rhomboids, which sit here and make the scapula go that way. Between that and the rest of the muscles in the shoulder girdle, you have a complex system pulling in all sorts of directions on all three planes, controlling the scapula. However, the very first thing that kind of comes into play here is SA. So how can we? So what are some good ways for us to feel this out? If you have a sword in front of you, if you have some other stick, if I hold my feather out in front of me like this, and I go to bend it in half, keeping my arms straight, then you feel tension right about here. If anybody is not feeling tension there, the emotion should be out here. Is if you want to, like you're a seal and you want to clap your hands, but you have a sword stuck between your hands, fins, livers. I don't know. You're a seal, you're holding a sword, you want to clap. So you go to clap, and you find that these little guys got to work. That is the thing that you're most likely to feel when you get your shoulders set. Now, talk a little bit about some of the inefficiencies that come from things like shrugging. If I am, I too want to see a seal that is an old-timey strongman. Now, if I have a target, let's say I got this squat stand, and it's all the way over there, and I just gotta reach it. Well, now yes, I can reach it, but this doesn't feel good. For starters, my back is all rounded. When I actually make contact, I kind of lose a lot of my power because again, I'm lacking this connection with the rest of my body. Taking the shoulders and getting them set does two things. First of all, I reestablished a connection with the rest of my body through this whole complex here. And getting the shoulders set like that also takes my spine and gets it into this good neutral position. Now, talk about some of the issues that some people run into with certain rapier forms. Right. you don't want to do your hip obviously like this. You want to do it like this, right? The combination of hip hinge with getting the shoulders set allows me to bear the weight of the sword through this entire chain here. And also saves my back because this is no fun. The difference between this and this is a very tiny step. Overreaching is definitely a thing that I as a tall person have certainly dealt with. After all, I am tall. I must use my reach to my advantage. Therefore, really try and reach very, very far. And at the end of the day, it ends up not working out so well. And you'll notice that when I reach out like this is also often accompanied with a loss of the kind of grip strength that keeps the sword stable in the hand, which we will get into when we do our little deep dive into W. So let's take a closer look at the hips. Now I talked about open versus closed hips, and of course everybody's done these drills, and everybody's got their got their footwork that goes this way, and this all goes quite nicely if you have your hips open. But what happens if I've already got a leg forward and maybe this toe is kind of pointed in a little bit, and I go to cut. That already doesn't feel very good down here. If I just correct the hips there, then we kind of run into the meridian issue, which we'll get to in a minute. But the clear difference between being here and being over here is in the question of, are my hips open? Now, what forms that stability? A lot of that comes from gluteus medius, which is the muscle in charge of one of the muscles in charge of taking your leg and making it do that. So what are some exercises for helping to strengthen this? Be a penguin. I'm noticing a theme with this actually now that I think of it. I'm gonna have to go with this cold water semi-aquatic animal thing. I think we're onto something here. Be a penguin, and what I mean by this is get up on your toes, make your heels go in, feeling tension right through here. Feel it almost like a band. And what I want you to do is try and really get your hips into it. Waddle. You get 5 extra points if you shout, "I'll get you, Batman," while you do this. Inversive. Now there's the inverse of this as well, in which you do in fact rotate internally. I generally have people do both of these. This you will feel kind of, in the first case, should feel tension through here. In the second case, tension is felt through here. And same deal, keep those tight. If you start feeling tension, like there's a twist in your knees, then ease up on this, find the point at which your knees feel okay. You know, what you don't want here is, like, if I just turn my feet out, but I don't engage this, then I've got a twist in here. If I just turn my feet in, but I don't engage any of this, then I get a similar, I get similar torsion in the knee. What you're looking for in this exercise is feeling out these muscles and how they play with each other, so that, and you'll find that when you're in kind of a neutral stance, you've always got a little bit of tension in your feet. Like if I want to take a good step that way, I've got tension through here already. And almost by just raising the leg and thinking that way, I can make the step happen. One of the things that I found really helpful about this is the idea that there's always tension present in the system. If there wasn't any tension, then we would just be a floppy pile of bones and meat. Which is a concept that I'll talk about some more in a bit. That's called tensegrity. The kind of a neologism compound word, tension and integrity, or tension-derived structural integrity. I can create movement by releasing tension somewhere, tension that I've created, which we can talk about a little, which we'll talk about a little bit more when I go back around a third time connecting these things. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was pelvic tilt. Now, I have a global here. All right, well, suppose I have this. This is a bowl of, well, I said male rings because of course it is. But let's pretend this is full of water. A bowl full of water, and if I open up my pelvis and I stick the bowl inside, then a couple of things can happen. If my hips are over here and they tilt this way, then water spills out the front. You'll also notice that I have a pronounced arch in my back. I've got a little bit of a forward lean. I might have a posture kind of like this. Pelvis is tilted forward. So stand in kind of neutral position, find your balance, and then if you can, I like to actually like grab my hip and tilt it forward, and I can feel that tilt and try and imagine water spilling out the front. Return to center. Similarly, so that is interior pelvic tilt. Similarly, if I take my hips here and I tilt them back, then I have posterior pelvic tilt. That's this low back is totally flattened out. It's, again, I've got a little bit of a forward lean, and it's really uncomfortable. In this case, my hips have tilted back, and water is spilling out the back of my bowl. And this is one of the things you can just feel out to kind of to learn what neutral spine feels like. Everybody's natural degree of pelvic tilt is a little bit different. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to this. Really, what it comes down to is what feels best for you. One of the points of this system is that it's flexible and it's meant to work for at least as many bodies as possible. Right, so hips, are they open? Is really the question. Pelvic tilts pelvic tilt does factor in, but it's a little bit of a side thing. The real question is are my hips open, or at least are all of these muscles here kind of doing things? Does it feel like things are working? Now, getting back to ME, the meridian. ME is where it meridian is where it all kind of starts to come together. So the first thing we can talk about here is the hip-shoulder connection. That is the relationship. Hang on, do I have Discord open? I have Discord open, don't I? That keeps making noises.
I thought that was me.
Oh, you know what? It may well have been. I don't know. Back to full screen. Right. So how did so hip shoulder connection? How does this work? Well, if I'm standing dead straight like this, my hips are pointing that way, and if I were to draw kind of an isosceles triangle off my shoulders, that would be pointing in the same direction that my hips are pointing. If I get over here, then hips are pointing that way, shoulders are pointing that way. What's the relationship between these two body parts? Is human bodies really like working in spirals. The way the kind of connective tissue between muscles is oriented shows actually a lot of a kind of spiral that comes down from the shoulder to the hip, and then around the knee and under the foot and back up this way. I put a diagram of it in the article that I wrote. I don't know if there's a link for that around somewhere, but actually, let me see if I can find it here. Spiral line. There we go. This book is Anatomy Trained by Thomas Myers. There we are. Right. So we have right up here. You see we have serratus anterior, and we got a nice line that goes from this left shoulder down to this right hip, and then it kind of continues around through there and goes back up, goes up the foot and up to the other side. The point being, bodies really like doing things in spirals. That's why it's easier to like, if I hold a weight in this hand and bring this foot up on the floor, that's a lot easier than doing the same thing over here. Forrest just really likes to go that way. So what does this have to do with our center line? Well, when these things have to be occasionally out of sync in order to produce force. But in general, if I am, let's say I've got my right foot forward and I'm over here in long point. Now there's a weird thing going on here where my shoulders want to point this way, but my hips want to point that way. And I've got tension in my hips, but that's still producing an inconsistency down here. I'm still feeling tension in my knee while I do this. So what can I do about it? Well, if I get over here, then all of a sudden things feel a lot better. What you'll notice is that I've brought my hips into the same plane, pointing in the same direction as my shoulders. And so this comes into play like all the time with two-handed swords. Of course, things change a little bit when you have one-handed things, which makes it a probably good time to get into that a little bit. Now, I mentioned before that the real question here is not are my hands in line with my center. It's really just are each of my arms within a comfortable range of motion? So let's explore that. Got my messer here. I can have it down at my side, and I can bring it up this way, and I can get up here. It's great. Can't really go any further than that without compensating. Okay, so I know that that is the limit here, and that's probably a realistic limit there. But I'm unlikely to find myself here while fencing. So okay, cool. So I have a realistic range of motion this way. How about the other way? Well, let's see. I can hold it out here and be pretty comfortable. If I start going further than that, I notice that my shoulder blade starts popping up. If I want to keep my shoulder blade in place, I have to really fight myself to get past there. So let's say that this is about where my limit is here. And what you're going to notice is that pretty much end up with my elbow pointing more or less straight forward. Now this does change a little bit as I pronate my hand, give nails down, as the Iberians would say. Now I can get a little bit further. However, in doing this, I start running. It gets a lot easier for me to lose this connection in here. The pronated hand is a lot more susceptible to losing this connection than the supinated hand. Nails up. Supination, because I'm taking this piece here and I'm twisting it that way, the shoulder blade kind of naturally wants to fall into place there, which makes supination such a nice easy position to actually learn that scapular connection from. So yeah, I can get a little bit further than that if my hand is pronated, but again, that starts feeling weird very quickly. So realistically, if I have my hand just kind of in a neutral position, I've got myself to here. Okay, cool. How about going the other direction? Well, let's see. Realistically, I can get about this far with this hand. Left side has the weird hypermobility, so I can actually kind of get back there with it. Everybody's different. And if you have people who are hypermobile will already kind of know to be careful with those end ranges of motion. Cool. So I have, if I go in a circle, I realistically have this much space to play with. And that means that I can move, as I kind of showed before, that means that I can move diagonally. Right? And while kind of moving your hips is certainly recommended, it is still feasible to get a halfway decent cut by just staying still. And as I said before, we lose that with a two-handed sword. All of this works. This, not so much. Right? You see that the further I get from here, again, you see his knees kind of starting to drift in. It's a thing that I think happens a lot with test cutting, where we're starting out over here, Matt's right there, and I go to cut the mat. Except this first portion of the cut it lacks the drive from your hips. So, okay. So what if I start before there? Well, now I can actually rotate my body to get through this cut. Allowing yourself to kind of get away from the center line in a long position ends up becoming very uncomfortable. And one of the things that we notice is once again, as I start drifting over here, one shoulder starts coming up. And so this shoulder starts coming up, this starts coming back. And what I'm effectively putting myself into is the first throw in Jess Finley's book on ringing. in which from push pull I take my opponent's elbow and drag it over here while pushing them back this way, and I can then step behind them and throw them. In a very small way, this is putting yourself in a similar position. If I want my sword to be over here, that's great. That is my goal. This feels awesome. This also feels pretty good. If it so happens that I have mobility to point my hips in a certain direction, like with my left foot forward, I can be here and I can get all the way to right there. Cool. But I can't really get any further than this, which means that if I want to be over here, that step has to take place. The point there, the point of all this being that your hips end up dictating where your center line is. Where your hips go, your shoulders will follow. I want to point this way. Right, I can get like that. I can also get like this. If I can find a reasonable amount of stability in this position, then that's great. This is also the way transverse steps end up working. If I want to move across my line, doing so this way, this actually really belongs in the hips category. But if I want to step across the line, that's really not good. I feel terrible. And you could push me over by going. Okay, like this on the other hand, all of a sudden hips are open and I have a much more stable base that I can continue to move through. Now the meridian, the idea of the meridian kind of magnifies the further apart the hands get. With longsword, I tend to like a grip that's about three palms long. And so I've got just this amount of space between my hands. And so I actually end up with a bit of wiggle room, particularly with winding. I can be in a pretty comfortable position here. And this also explains why, like, Luke here is totally comfortable. Neither of these elbows are getting past a comfortable position for themselves, right? I'm over here in Dende Gigano. This is totally fine. This is a very comfortable position to be in. I'm very okay with this. Once again, neither of my arms are getting out of out of that strong position. My shoulder blades are doing their thing. They're very happy. Our tolerances get smaller and smaller as we extend. Our tolerances also get smaller and smaller as our hands get further and further apart. On the montante, right, I've got about 4 palms long, and all of a sudden, that winding is suddenly a little bit more difficult to do without turning my hips. Because my arms are here. If I want to turn them over fully extended, right there is just about at the limits of what is comfortable for me. And if I want to get that point forward, well, that's no good. I want to have that back, which means that my hips end up shifting. Space between my hands is in line with my center. We take the hands a little bit further apart. And at this point, even if I turn my hips this way, winding gets incredibly difficult. It's very difficult to cross my hands, which is why, especially in a lot of the earlier stuff, so you're a lot more likely to see to have everything occur in this open position. Now, a lot of the later stuff does put you into positions like this, and you'll notice that in those your arms are just playing close together. If I got them like all the way out here, I've got this much wiggle room and about this much all the way out here. The further apart your hands get, the smaller your tolerances get for deviation from center. In such a way that if I get my hands a little bit closer and I want to get to the other side, I have to step and turn my hips this way. So the meridian is kind of where things really start to melt together, where it becomes really obvious how your center line plays with the shoulders and the hips. We see that when I kind of get away from center, my shoulders start to get away from me. My shoulders start to get away from me. My hips start to get away from me. That feels bad on my shoulder. That feels bad on my knees. But if I get everything to a nice and centered position, here, whatever. Owning that center line for yourself kind of ends up being the key to moving more good. No, but it is almost the deciding factor in how well you're moving, how well you are projecting and absorbing force. I'll walk back the absorbing force a little bit, but yeah, good for movement, good for helping to prevent injury, good for fencing pretty. Now the last point, wrists, is a little bit subtle, but it's the one that really drives home the question of what is your goal, what are you trying to accomplish. A couple of funny things about the wrists themselves and how they play with everything else. Now I mentioned a term that was called tensegrity. That is, once again, tension that comes from structural integrity. I'm sorry, structural integrity that comes from tension. Your hands and your grip are a great example of this. Your hands are are a bunch of loose sticks sitting on a pile of rocks, sitting on another pair of sticks. The only way that these really do things is because you have all these strings, all these pulleys pulling against your hand and against these bones up here at different rates. And by playing with their grip, we can kind of see how some of this works. If I squeeze my top two fingers, then I have, and I go to move my wrist this way, find that I have loads of stability this way. I can resist this quite well. However, if I want to go this way, I have almost no stability if all of my tension is in these two fingers. I go to, these are magic sword gripping fingers, go to these two, and now I go to this direction here, hello, this ulnar and radial deviation. Then I have loads of stability if I go to bend this, if I go to bend the wrist in this direction. However, if I go to bend it this way, I have almost no resistance. If I have a very closed fist, then I'm stable in all directions. So it should come as no surprise that, of course, we again go back to fencing 101. We're told that it's all about how important these fingers are. These fingers are the ones that keep you from doing doing uncomfortable things to your wrists. That is where that tension happens. I lose tension there. I lose the orientation of my wrist. Now, there's a funny thing that happens when I shrug up like this. It becomes a lot more difficult for these to form a stable connection with the sword. It's stopping the sword coming down here. I get a lot more, this feels a lot less stable. And I feel a lot of tension in here. That is easily one of the flavors of sword elbow, and I think that's golfer's elbow. When this becomes an issue, and that tendon becomes really inflamed. One of the things that helps keep this stable is that connection to the rest of the body with the scapula engaged with the rib cage. That feels great. That feels not so great, and ends up resulting in this bent wrist, despite my efforts at keeping that wrist straight. Wrist integrity. Right, so the wrist. So now we see how the shoulders also ends up influencing the wrists. Now, back to the question of what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? Because ultimately that is going to be the thing that allows you to decide what your grip is going to look like. Want to be here? Great. But what if I want to form a nice straight line with between my arm and the sword? Well, that's like okay, I guess, but that's not great. That doesn't feel so good. I'm definitely lacking stability here. So what if I do this with the flat up and I extend? Well, actually, that seems great. So what is it about this grip that's allowing me to do that? The answer is really just that the sword is being allowed to move through your grip, and you are finding a way to keep that stable. Well, over here, no reason to expect this grip to do that when you have this or this, which you've probably been doing all this time. This whole thing here, by the way, I will forever credit Adam Frandy of the Lansing Longsword Guild. What up, Adam? For the mnemonic of calling this hot dog grip, because you're going, here, friend, have a hot dog. Would you like a hot dog? Welcome to the barbecue. Yeah, hot dog grip. I love it. It is my favorite mnemonic ever. But think of a position and think of what your hands need to do in order to keep your wrists straight. Whatever the position is, if I get myself into a position, here's a thing that a lot of people run into early on, is kind of not letting this hand stay loose. They'll end up here, or there, the dreaded left out chicken wing. And really the answer all along was to let that be nice and loose, nice and relaxed. Your wrists will tell you when they're in a position that's not great, because it'll feel uncomfortable. Everybody's hands are built a little bit different. Like I got a weird short metacarpal over here, so that means this pinky ends up being like way short. I always end up with like this much flapping in the breeze on gloves. So a comfortable grip for me ends up looking something like this. For some people, that grip might look like something closer to this. That doesn't feel great for me because I'm losing contact here, but for some people that might feel great. This feels great for me, so that's what I'm going to go with. The question here for you and for your fencing is, what feels good for me? What am I trying to accomplish? How do I do that in a way that is healthy, that moves well? And I found that doing things that are healthy and that move efficiently also end up just plain looking better. Really, I hate using the word structure, but really well-structured movements often in fencing tend to look very pretty. So if you do it for nothing else, for no other reason, do it because it looks cool. Okay. Now, a couple of things. Yes, other thing that I wanted to touch on regarding tensegrity, because it deals with people's comfort in certain positions and with long sword. Now, excuse me, I'm going to grab a prop. Stupid box. Inside the stupid box. These cool things. The name is escaping me right now. Somebody. Flex bars. Flex bar is the TheraBand brand name for these things. They're great. You can use them for grip strength. Use them for like PT for tennis elbow and stuff like that. The ones that I got, there's a total of 6 of them. They come in different weights or resistances. Yellow is nice and easy to show, although it's showing up very strangely on camera. So let me actually go to the green instead. So let's talk about tensegrity. One thing that I was told was that everybody's arms is that if you want good structure in a cut, your arms must be totally straight. Except the thing is that when I then started kind of playing around with shorter positions, like the positions that I end up in while wearing a breastplate, because when I have my breastplate on, I can't do this. I can get here. I can't get there. And granted, my breastplate doesn't fit me great. It's off the rack. But this is the thing that I've heard from several other people, is that getting out here is just not a thing they can really do. So, okay, is there a way to be nice and strong in a shorter position? Well, actually, yeah. One of the really cool things about having two hands on a weapon is that you can apply tension in the grip. And I'm going to put my thumbs in a line and watch my shoulder blades while I do this as well. And with these lines here, you can see this very subtle twist. What I'm doing is providing a little bit of tension. That tension is coming from my back into my hands. And it's wringing out this, but of course, on an object that is not flexible, like the grip of this longsword, that doesn't go anywhere. So what am I left with? I'm left with the tension that is being applied to this, being resisted by this, and ultimately I'm capable of supporting this and a force vector that might be coming this way, for example, with short arms. It might not. I might not necessarily have my bones stacked in the same way that this is, but that's not the most comfortable thing for everybody. This might be a lot more comfortable. And again, thinking about ringing out realistically in either direction. I like doing this, especially with the little thumb on the cross. Having that tension there, whichever way you tend to apply it, ends up being immensely helpful in working in these short positions where you can't get long. I don't have quite, it's a lot harder for me to do that with a one-handed weapon. It's very difficult for me to say give it Zorn how with this and not kind of fold under a lot of force. This works out a lot better. But you know what? I don't have the rest of my body doing weird things with the other arm, preventing me from getting here. I can get there, and this feels awesome. This feels great. That may not be so with the longsword. Again, everybody's built a little bit differently. Everybody's got different comfort levels. I don't really even like being. Rather, I should revise that. I don't like being totally perfectly pinned straight out here. And you see, like my shoulders kind of end up right up there. That ends up being my dead pin straight. And if I want to be like straight out there, what are my goals? I want the longest line possible, which means arm needs to be up here, parallel with the ground. I want my longest line possible. Great, so I hinge into it. I have done effectively nothing with the position of my arms. Only thing that I've done is hinged at the hips and allowed me to get up here where I no longer have all of the just body that's around this band in the way. So if you had a longsword down here, tensegrity is your friend. Providing tension in both directions on the sword is a thing that keeps you stable gives you very stable through cuts. You can get a really nice strong cut from here. It's not difficult. That sword handle that's gonna stop a strike could be there. You may, your opponent might be, your training partner might be very, 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 very large. In which case, yeah, that sword handle might always look something like this. Whatever your build is, whatever you find yourself needing to do it. If it doesn't feel good to like really reach out with your arms totally straight, don't. You got a long sword. You can be here. The important thing in this case is keeping that tension and feeling that tension through what you'll ultimately find is the entire backside of the body, the entire posterior chain as it is. Okay, right, so that was a lot. I'll recap a little bit just with the kind of overall question. Shoulders, are my shoulders set, which is to say, are my shoulder blades engaged with the rib cage? Am I feeling the weight of the sword in my shoulders, or am I feeling the weight of the sword through everything else? S, are my shoulders set? H, are my hips open, but really are the muscles around my hips turned on and working? ME, meridian, are my hands in line with my center, or otherwise is my arm within a comfortable range of motion without disturbing the S in this equation? And W, are my wrists straight? Included in all of this is the question of what am I trying to accomplish and what do I need to do with my body to make that happen? And yeah, that's SHMeW. I think, how much time has it been? Cool, yeah, oh, wow, that was about an hour, nice. Cool, yeah, I can do some questions.
Yeah, if there's any questions, pop them into the chat, or pop them into the question and answer thing. I noticed Kevin had some questions and comments. He was saying, I think that was intuitive having hands next to each other rather than extremely far apart when doing ascending cuts. I had a question about, is the sword on the flat parallel to the ground? I'm sorry, is the sword on the flat parallel to ground, having the back hand taking most of the torque and right hand just supporting the weight? I think that was a question just about.
So I'm pulling up the chat, I see.
About 10 minutes ago or so.
The back hand taking most of the torque and right hand just supporting the weight. I mean, so I think I assume you're referring to this. Of course, now I have a chat window in the way. Let me move that to the side. Come on. There we go. So let's see. When I'm here, I've really got. So if I go back to my flex bar, I'm almost kind of doing this. But of course with just the sword. Yeah, they're both opposing each other fairly equally, I think. One of the things that I like about thinking of it in terms of this is that I mean, here if I want to wind left and I kind of release tension with this hand, I go this way. And if I want to wind right, now release tension with this hand, I just sort of go this way because that's where I already want to go. It's a thing that I've sort of been playing with for a little while is the idea of thinking of movement in terms of releasing tension in places rather than creating tension in them. But I mean, to your question though, like I don't know, they're both kind of in there. Exactly which hand has more weight on it ends up kind of moving around all the time. I can't say I've thought too much about it, other than that sometimes I'm providing torque this way, sometimes I'm providing torque this way. You know, sometimes to the inside, sometimes to the outside. Yeah, it really varies. It's really situational. It's kind of just a thing to explore on your own and things and get a feel for yourself. Cool. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Hope that helps. We have. Was there anything else in the? Any other questions in there?
That was all the questions that I saw at the moment. Anyone else have any other questions, comments? I was actually curious about some exercises for improving shoulder mobility, because that's definitely something that I have. Like the shoulders are always a tricky point, you know.
Totally. Okay. Yes. So this gets into totally my favorite exercise. And that is a thing that we call teacups. I think they're called that because it comes from like tea servers or something like that. But you can. I usually have my students use a beanbag. If you want to do it like really traditionally, you do it with like a teacup on a saucer, which is a little higher stakes than I generally care for. But in this case, I'll use my couple nail, place it in my palm, and the teacup exercise goes like so. I first take my hand and bring it under my shoulder. And then from here, I want to have my arm extended out. But I have to keep from dropping the teacup, and I also cannot assist with my fingers. Now I got to get back with my arm facing directly out. So I come up over the shoulder, up over the head, and back out here. Whole movement all together ends up looking like this. And you see there, I'm kind of leaning into it. That's a really good way of scaling this exercise for difficulty. If I want to do this totally pin straight, this is how you would have to do it if you're doing two at once. Right. And then I gotta get way out. There you see I'm already leaning into it a little bit. Whereas, there we go. And then back out. Now that actually, the end portion of that actually can hurt a little bit because I've got a little bit of an tinge there from work. Would you know it? Building things with a 10-pound staple done for several hours, often in this position, is bad for your shoulder. Who'd have thunk it? Who knew? Anyway, teacups in the opposite direction are from here, just all the way around. Instead of going under the arm, you go out first. And then you go up over the head and then under the arm and back out. Now I talked about scaling with difficulty. You saw that it was fairly difficult for me to do it while standing perfectly straight. But if I have difficulty getting into part of the range of motion, I can lean into it. This is an awesome exercise it's a great diagnostic. It's a good way to tell which things are tight. If you find that something feels tight, take your time, work through it slowly. So let's see, I do this with the left arm. We get under here, out there, and yeah, I'm noticing this feels a little bit tight. So I'm just going to keep that tension. I'm going to work through it. while I'm doing this, I feel tension all through here. And then I get back over here. And I come around, we have that back there. Needed some time. And then I get back here and I can go. So like it's a great warm up. I usually have my students do 5 of each of those on both sides, and like you do get through those reps, and you generally feel pretty good. That's great for shoulder mobility. Let's see a couple other things. Easiest to do if you have a kind of a long stick. Start with your arm with your hands far apart, and just get overhead and try and get back here. These have the worst name ever, which is shoulder dislocations. So you see that here, I can start with my arms really, my hands really far apart, and start working in. Yeah, right now I can't quite get past here, so my arms a little further. And I can do that, go back and forth like that with both hands on the stick. This direction or this in that direction, any which way that you can sort of get your shoulders to move. If you can just kind of go through some of those ranges of motion, that's a great way to work on mobility there, because especially in cases like this, mobility really comes down to strength through a range of motion, and your shoulders have a lot of those. So yeah, teacups are great. Otherwise, for kind of preventative care, there is a PT routine called Throwers 10. It was developed for baseball pitchers whose rotator cuffs are under ridiculous strain all the time. It is a horrifically boring routine. It is the absolute worst, but it's really good for you. When I was rehabbing the left shoulder, I did that for a couple of weeks. I hated doing it because, again, it's really, really boring. But otherwise, an excellent kind of prehab exercise if you are in a position where your shoulder's under a lot of strain, which I should probably do that for this shoulder because the shoulder's under a lot of strain frequently. But would you know it? It's really boring, so I never do it. Anyway, so yeah, the teacups especially, really, really good for that. Again, great warm up, great diagnostic, great strength builder, and it's a thing you can scale in difficulty as you go along. If you find that you can get through one side really quick, if you then take 2 and go through with that at the same time, you are no longer able to lean in one direction or the other, because of course if you lean this way, you drop it over there, and etc. Very scalable exercise. Great cool down stretch. Yeah, totally.
Awesome. I like that. I've been doing it now with the random things around my room, and I keep dropping them. So more practice required. Similar question about the pelvis. I know that when I first started sword stuff, I was not aware at all of my pelvis. But it's I actually went to physical therapy and learned about just how important that pelvis is. What are some exercises for people who are just trying to literally figure out where their pelvis is and how it moves? Some just good intro exercises for, okay, how do I move this thing around?
Okay, yeah. So the kind of a fun exercise for internal versus external rotation is like kind of come up onto my toes a little bit, keep my heels light. So weights off my heels, and I go in. Cool, then I've got the internal rotation, everything's going in. And I go out, and then I've got external, cool. And you got the lamest little dance ever. But then I can go onto my toes and have everything go this way. And then I can have everything go that way. As you're doing this, kind of pay attention to what these hip muscles are doing. As right, I get this way, I feel all the tension. Feel all the tension in this side. I get the other way. Well, now all of a sudden I feel all the tension in this side, and I can kind of do the twist here. I don't know if that's what the twist actually looks like. Well, then if you want to add an extra little fun thing to it, I can do that same thing on the heels. Now, if I do it on my heels, and my toes, my heels, my toes, and all of a sudden I got the Breakfast Club shuffle, the least cool version of the Breakfast Club shuffle you've ever seen. But this is a really cool way of, but it's kind of a cool way of figuring out what your hips are doing. There's the water bowl exercise, kind of figuring out what feels good there. Let's see. So the question wasn't about strengthening. This question was really about proprioception. Oh, what's some of the things that I do? I showed you the kind of goofy penguin walks. Again, these are cases where you're looking for that feeling of tension through here and conversely through here. People generally seem to get it through like footwork stuff. Make one foot pass in front of the other. We've talked about hips open versus hips closed, but you have to keep your hips open, and you can't change which way your hips are pointing, which generally ends up looking something like this. That teaches a little bit of balance. Kind of ends up it ends up being kind of a lot of just goofy playtime. What kind of weird things can you do with your hips? I can I'm just spitballing on movements here. I can do that. I can do this, and I can kind of kick back this way. And I can go up this way, and I can also make all kinds of circles happen here. And while I'm making all kinds of circles happen there, I can think about what's going on here. And that is probably something I should develop a little more concretely. But for the most part, like guided playtime is kind of a helpful way of going about that. I found it's especially like the goofy walks. It's impossible to look cool while doing it. So I don't know. I at least find that if I'm doing something that looks immensely uncool and everybody else is doing something that looks immensely uncool, then I don't know. It does something. It kind of gets me out of my own head a little bit. And just doing goofy stuff that helps learn things. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Oh no, that was great. And Carrie also has a really helpful comment in the chat for anybody else who had questions about this. Basically lying on your back on the floor with knees bent, taking the legs out of the picture, and just tilting the pelvis forward and backward. That's awesome advice. That's some of the stuff I did in physical therapy, which is always good. Any other questions for Dan? It's like I can allow people to talk if anyone's interested in that. You can just ping the chat and I can press a button. Otherwise, this is. Do you have anything else there? Because this actually isn't. This isn't a terrible time to cut it if you're good, or we can keep shitting.
Oh, thank you, Deanna.
Or just heap Dan with praise. This was, I really enjoyed this. Lots of really great concepts about, I know the word structure is tainted, but just in like all these things are pieces of what I typically think of as structure, like making sure that your body is in a configuration that allows you to move, to be effective, to not overextend or hurt yourself. And that's everything you talked about is just so fundamental to having that good. I almost want to call it like posture, I guess, like just that combo of things. Real good, awesome stuff.
Sure. Actually, hang on. I'm dropping a link to. So I wrote an article on this a while back. I'm just dropping a link to that in the chat.
Oh yes, and I'll add that to the. I'll put that on the Facebook post as well. Perfect. I'm also going to take this opportunity real quick to just drop a link to our PayPal in the chat. Actually, this is completely free, but any donations basically will go towards making Swordsquatch 2022 all the better. We're hoping to go in person again. We'll see what the world holds. But yeah,
Yes,
any donations are
lonely people. They are cool and they do really cool things.
Yeah. And he's not just saying that because we paid him, because we didn't pay. But yeah, super appreciate your time, Dan. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, anytime. And we're gonna have you again on Sunday, I believe, for another excellent lecture. And in about half an hour here, we've got Charles Lynn. His webinar is coming up. Experiments in Arms, starting up at 7 p.m. PST. Not too late to register for that one if you're interested. Dan, thanks again. Miss you, buddy. Can't wait to see you in person. That was an excellent presentation, and we will leave it there. Have a good one, everyone. Hope to see you in half an hour at Charles' lecture.
All right. So long, everybody.
Ta-ta!
Bye.
And now we just awkwardly hang right here.
So Roland, where's Loki?
Yes. Bonus material. Get that cat. Oh man, everybody who left is going to be so mad that they missed this. I have to stop talking, otherwise my video frame will come up and people need to see this cat.
There we are. Loki is the actual head of Liberty Sword Club.
Here he is.
He's the one that's actually in charge. Oh no. And this is where we get to our father's practice. Yep. He's a very good trainer.
That is so pure. We shall now look at this cat for half an hour.
As he will stay on my back. There we go.
Excellent.
Right. Bye, Loki.
We got the cat's butthole. I think we got the required web streaming live event cat butthole. Perfect note to end on.
You're not allowed to end the meeting without cat butthole. Exactly. It's against the rules.
And we've finally done it.
Yes.
All right, excellent. See you all soon. Take it easy, everybody. And
Good night, everybody.
happy Swordsquatch.